block up there. There we go. Good morning. It is Friday, April 18th, 2025. We're in House Transportation after the morning floor session. And we have Sandy Tebow from Chittenden Area Transportation Management Association, so CATMA. Believe it or not, our committee assistant and I do keep a list of all of topics that get requested and mentioned, and we work on trying to make sure requests that have been made by members of the committee are followed up on and shared. And there is members of the committee that asked for this testimony. It may have been 6 or 8 weeks ago. It might have been way back when, but it was on the list. And Fridays we try to get to groups. So that's why we're here as a member request for testimony. We're interested in learning more about your organization and tell us what you guys do, and welcome to the committee. Introduce yourself and take it away.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll start with sharing my screen. Okay. So yes, thank you for inviting me today. My name is Sandy Tebow. I'm Executive Director of the Chittenden Area Transportation Management Association, also known as CATMA. Today I was going to provide an overview of who CATMA is, our programs, our impacts, and our legislative priorities. So CATMA, who is CATMA? We were founded in 1992, yes, 3 years ago, by Champlain College, UVM, and the UVM Medical Center. They came together to jointly plan transportation and parking to better coordinate land use on the Hill in Burlington, to reduce congestion, single occupant vehicles, and to ensure that there was connectivity for their affiliates in and around Chittenden County. Our vision, mission, and goals are here outlined on this page and in your packets as well. I did hand out a 2024 annual report, which does have some of the information I'm sharing today as well. In 2015, we transitioned to a regional association. That meant that we opened up membership to businesses and developers in Chittenden County that would be eligible to join CATMA as a dues-paying member. We really serve as a gateway in Chittenden County between employers, developers, service providers, municipalities to plan, manage, and implement transportation demand management programming, which I'll talk about a little bit more about TDM. So this slide here I think it's a really great visual of CATMA's reach in Chittenden County. So the top tier that you're seeing is our founding institutions and our dues paying members. These dues paying members, affiliates, faculty, staff, employees, and students are all eligible for our programs, which I will talk about as well. And then the bottom tier is our transportation coordinator network. And with the success that CATMA had on the Hill in 2015, we created this network as an opportunity to engage and educate more employers and developers on what TDM is and the benefits and the values. This bottom tier is not eligible for CATMA programming. But what they do receive is bi-monthly newsletters from CATMA that's filled with transportation information. And it may be changes in GMT schedules or corridor projects happening, the Exit 14 Bike Ped Bridge or Burlington Winooski Bridge, projects that might impact someone's commute. So we try to fill our newsletters with a lot of information to those non-dues paying members. So to just, again, educate them and be sure they're aware of what's going on that could affect their employees or their residents or their communities and their commute. We also invite them to a couple of events a year. We have a spring event where we bring in our coordinators. We have about 100 businesses and organizations that are participating in our network. Couple industry lingo terms. So what is a TMA? CATMA is a TMA. There are two TMAs in Vermont. There's CATMA and there's the Upper Valley TMA, which serves the Dartmouth College Hospital, New Hampshire area. And the TMAs really come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Some TMAs operate shuttles, some TMAs focus education, outreach, and marketing. And in CATMA's case, we have a pretty comprehensive programming from marketing, education, outreach, collecting data, analysis. So the definition here of a TMA is basically a public-private partnership where they come together and form an association in an effort to reduce single occupant vehicles by promoting other modes of transportation. The TDM definition here is, this definition was created by the Association for Commuter Transportation. They're a national organization that have been around for a couple of decades now, maybe more. It's kind of TDM is such a wonky term, but this is the definition here. And basically TDM is a use of various strategies to encourage people to use other modes of transportation to reduce congestion. And that can be through policies, parking pricing, programming, marketing, collecting data, technology, et cetera. And here is sort of the TDM wheel of various options that you all are aware of. So a little bit about CATMA membership. So we offer membership to businesses and developers in Chittenden County. And for employers, their membership fee is based on the number of employees that they employ. And for developers, it's based on the square footage of a development. Our membership really falls into 4 categories. We have our TDM planning and support. So strategic planning, when we're working with an employer or a developer, assessing, what transportation options aside from single occupant vehicles do they have easy access to? What kind of bike facilities do they have or maintenance at their site?
Sorry to interrupt. So like a developer, there's a lot going on in South Burlington or whatever. Do they have zoning or part of their approval process? Are they, required to figure out how people are going to get around?
Yes, Burlington, South Burlington does have a TDM ordinance that I think is working through their city council or through their process right now. And Winooski is as well, where a developer will receive points based on the TDM measures that they put in place. And then how the city is working through how to monitor that they are in compliance, on an annual basis. So, and Burlington has had a parking ordinance in place for a very long time, and they eliminated their minimum parking requirements, I think 3 or 4 years ago now. And so they are strengthening the TDM requirements. So that's where CATMA, you'll see some of our membership, is primarily in Burlington because of the policy in place. But I know South Burlington has something in process.
So it's sort of tied to how much parking they have to provide in some cases. Maybe they can reduce it with a better TDM score.
Right, because parking is expensive. It's, $20,000 or more to build and maintain a parking space versus, providing, transit benefits or e-bikes, incentives at their workplace. Some employers are subsidizing, providing that benefit as well, and just having the bike facilities and really creating a work site or a development site that has that culture of, non-vehicle, presence. So I think and obviously all of that affects, our climate and economy.
Thank you.
So Here are the four categories of our membership: the TDM planning and support, and then the commuter programs. We have bike walk rewards programs. We have guaranteed ride home. We facilitate transit and car share programs with our members, and facilitate and helping them set those programs up. And I will say education and outreach is such a big component of our work. We are, at the work sites, at development sites, educating people on how do I ride the bus? Just simple questions like that could be a barrier for people to get on the bus. Or trip planning. I live in Essex and I need to commute, into Burlington. How do I do that? So CATMA has a trip planning tool, which is on our app. Because a program or a service can only be as effective as people know about it. Like any product. So I just really stress how important the education and outreach. And I think that's where CATMA's been really successful, because we have strong partnerships in the institutions and at our membership, and continually meet with them 2 to 3 times a year about whether it's a HR benefit fair or a sustainability fair or a wellness fair, and just tie in alternative transportation and CATMA programs into those conversations. So I just really think that education and outreach, sometimes is under not discussed enough or not.
Are you seeing that companies are incentivizing their employees to use CATMA services, like as part of a wellness plan, or do they get a rebate, or do you feel like their success is really solely just outreach and education?
I would say, so CATMA does not operate any transit or shuttles or services, but we have really close partnerships with GMT and CarShare, other service providers. And some employers, in the case of UVM and Champlain College, they have been investing in up to around $400,000 a year pre-COVID and currently, so that all their faculty, staff, and employees can ride the bus for free, which obviously helps them from a land use perspective and parking. And then they also tie it into wellness or sustainability or a recruitment tool for HR. So I don't know, did that answer your
So they're putting
question?
money into, they're supporting CATMA
Correct.
financially, but I guess unsure of whether they are incentivizing individual employees to use the bus versus driving a car.
Yes, they do. Through various departments, or just at maybe a general manager of a smaller employer, does encourage their employees, and that's really important. I will say we have some work to do to really kind of ramp up their engagement and promotion, because CATMA provides them the language, the marketing, the materials, and it's really important that they, as the transportation coordinator, the link to CATMA, is disseminating that information out at their work site. So it is something we're working on to, because it's really important. They know their constituents, they know where they get their information. So most of our employers membership are subsidizing transit. The city of Burlington, as an employer, is subsidizing transit. The city of Essex Junction has joined CATMA just last year as an employer, and they're subsidizing transit. So we have a comprehensive suite of programs, but an employer or member may choose to participate in transit or maybe not participate in transit because it's not accessible or available to them. Or maybe there's not a safe bikeway to their work site. So they may tell us, biking is not like a key strategy that we want to implement.
Yeah, so to add to that, I work for 2 companies that I see that are on the lower list.
Mhm.
And one of the things they did was provide this sort of guaranteed ride home. So if you commuted by bike or, carpool, and in the middle of the day, you had to scoot home for some emergency, or at the end of the day, you're biking and it started snowing,
Mhm.
just from experience, you could take one of the company vehicles home for that night and come back. So that really encouraged a lot of people to go ahead and do it because, you know, if an emergency came up, something came up, you weren't stuck.
Mhm. That's a really valuable program that which Go Vermont at VTrans offers that program statewide, and CATMA, we work really closely with Go Vermont, but focused on our CATMA brand in Chittenden County. And that guaranteed ride home can make the difference of someone deciding to take the bus or carpool, because what we hear when we're out tabling is, oh, I would carpool, you know, my coworker does that, but what if my child gets sick and I have to get home? Or what if my carpooler has to leave early, then I'm stuck. So again, that education piece is really important to let them know you have a guaranteed ride home that your employer, through their membership with CATMA or through the state, non-Chittenden County, you know, will pay for that ride home, whether it's an Uber or a Lyft or a taxi service, if you can find one, and then reimburse them. So, and some people will be, you know, that can be a game changer. You're like, oh, that's great. I didn't know about that program. I can carpool, even if it's twice a week, I can get home in an emergency. So thanks for mentioning that program.
You know, just following up on that, so that's what I was gonna ask is there like a designated car somewhere or no, just whatever might be available in terms of an Uber or Lyft or?
Right, it would be Uber or Lyft, or a taxi service. So, there might be some companies, as you mentioned, that do offer their company fleet vehicle as a transportation option. I can see that. I could see a couple of those employers, you know, offering that. But yeah, it's really through Uber, Lyft, or a taxi service, which can be challenging, you know, if you're a hospital worker and your carpooler left at 9 and you're working till 10:30, it can be challenging maybe to get an Uber or Lyft.
Okay.
So it is definitely that guaranteed ride home program, you know, as far as the service providers, can be challenging. And then data collection and reporting. Obviously, that's how we measure our performance with our programming and compliance for our employers or developers with their municipality. And then this QR code here goes to our membership page, which has a lot of information about an employer membership versus a developer membership. So a little bit about CATMA's impacts and on our program. So currently we serve with our membership 15,000 employees, 15,000 students, 1,400 residents at our developers. This data that you see here is reflective of our 2,000 members that are registered with CATMA in our app that are recording their trips. These data points are consistent with Go Vermont's. So as I move through a couple of these slides, is noting the impact that CATMA participation has on the state impact. In July 2023, Go Vermont partnered with CATMA to implement our CATMA app, which is very similar to the Go Vermont app, but really a Chittenden County focus, and CATMA branded to our membership. So I'll just leave you, you know, with some of these data points. And then here on the right is some of our programs, which we've talked about. Just really quick, we conduct an annual employee and student transportation survey every year. This is a way for us to measure the mode trends and understand what the barriers are and what the opportunities are to increase non-SOV travel. So I guess just a couple of points here. I just focused on drive alone, walk, bike, and transit here. We have data on carpooling and telework and other modes. So approximately, we had about 25% response rate from employees in our survey and a 16% response rate from students, which is what this data represents. So you can see the employee drive alone in 2024 is just down slightly to 61% from 2023, so slight difference. Off-campus students, drive alone went down significantly, to 30% from 37% in 2023, which is always, it's interesting. So what are these off-campus outside a half a mile of campus? They are not driving. And then I would just point out here that the American Community Survey data is Vermont's drive alone rate is 73% and Chittenden County is 66%. And so again, just illustrating CATMA's impact on that Chittenden County drive alone rate. Transit use, employee transit use was pretty stable at about 4% between 23 and 24. Off-campus student transit use was down a bit, and on-campus student transit use was up a hair. And walk bike, again, this was interesting because off-campus students, in 2024 were at 42% biking and walking to campus, which coincides with their not driving alone. And that was up from 35% in 2023. On the right here, this is just showing you some of the popular routes that our employees and students take on the GMT service. This was a check all that apply question. So on any given day, what bus routes do you use? So just to give you an idea of some of the consistencies and use of GMT routes. This year, I just wanted to share, I mentioned the CATMA app, which is in partnership with the Go Vermont app. We launched this in July 2023, but this particular chart is for the calendar year 2024. And so you can see blue is the Go Vermont program and the people that are participating in that program, and the green is the CATMA participation. I really appreciate the support that Go Vermont has provided for CATMA and strengthening TDM and our services in Chittenden County. And I think this chart really demonstrates, the CATMA members are very active and recording their trips as well. And again, how CATMA and Chittenden County are contributing to the overall state numbers. In regards to CATMA's legislative priorities, so it would be great to include the definition of transportation demand management into the transportation bill. This is very common in our industry and a lot of TMAs in their municipalities, like ensuring that the TDM is included in the language. And then the identifying and advancing a dedicated funding source or sources for public transportation and TDM programs, including public transit, including e-bikes, and as well as the infrastructure to support what Vermont has as a pretty aggressive housing targets coming up, and employment and economic goals. So we need the transportation to support that growth. And then investing in maintaining public transit services while there is an exploration of a more sustainable long-term funding source. CATMA is a member of the Transportation for Vermonters Coalition, which I know that you have all received their agenda as well. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about bike share from an e-bike perspective. I imagine some of you in this room are aware of the Bird bikes that were operating in the cities of Burlington, South Burlington, and Winooski. CATMA led that effort. We had the agreement with the Bird Bike Share, and there's a lot of data here, but I really wanted to provide this information so that you have it for future reference. And just, it was a really valuable, accessible transportation option. It was available 24/7. So those retail and restaurant workers or hospital workers were having access to a transportation option. Unfortunately, Bird is not returning this spring. They said because of economic reasons, and maybe it's due to our small population. We're not Washington, D.C. and New York City and some of these other bigger cities. Or maybe it was some of the restrictions that were in place, where birds could operate, in our region. So I just wanted to let you know that Catmunt and our partners are going to dive into the data of the past. We've had 3 bike share systems over the past 6 years, national providers, and a couple of them went belly up and Bird is not returning. But I will say it was overwhelmingly well received by our community to have that transportation option with community pricing in place so that everyone was able to access this option who are transit dependent folks.
What's the cost to run that bird program?
So it cost us nothing. It was Bird coming in as the operator and operating the system. A previous system we had, I don't know if anyone recalls the bikes that had 7th generation and Ben and Jerry's branded on the bikes. They were really pedal bikes. They were not electric assist bikes. And those were sort of a sponsor-based program by the 2 primary sponsors, Ben and Jerry's and 7th Gen, but there were other employers that joined as well. So I think we're going to dive into the data and look at what worked, what didn't work, lessons learned, and what is the next iteration of bike share, because it really is an option that fills that first and last mile gap, gets people, I mean, I several times would see bikes at a bus stop, so someone took that bike to get to the bus stop. And I just think it's just an essential transportation option. And I know it doesn't work everywhere. And in our hilly Burlington, Winooski areas, it's a really appreciated option to have. So there's a lot of data here. I would also mention that the Bird system was a docked system versus was a dockless system versus docked. We've had both systems, and we saw a 300% increase in ridership with the Bird system because it was convenient. It was dockless. Someone didn't have to go to a dock 6 blocks away with their groceries and then walk to their home. Someone's not probably going to use that option, where the dockless system, you could park it outside correctly, on a green area. And I know there was certainly some challenges with that and concerns, which is understandable, but I think we can work through, maybe it's a hybrid system.
She's got another
Yeah,
question.
it's just share some experience. 15 years ago, maybe more, I was working in Paris and they had a bike share system there. And a lot of people were using it. It was a docked system. And so I used it a little bit. And they have sections that are up on the hill. There's a big hill, there. And what they were finding was people were taking the bike down the hill to get to the subway, but not taking it back up. And so they changed the way you pay for the system. Like you could get a monthly pass or whatever. And if you took the bike up the hill, you got credit on your account. So that they were able to sort of adjust that. It just shows that there are ways to sort of adjust the way the system works. So,
Absolutely.
Potentially you could say, hey, if you put it in a certain spot, you get more, it costs less or.
Right. And we
So
did.
there's incentives.
And Bird did implement that because of the parking concerns we were hearing from the community. We asked Bird to come up with a solution to try and address this. And so there was a credit that you could receive if you, parked it correctly. You had to take a picture of the bike after you parked it. Now, that's not to say someone can't come by and, knock it down. But there are, to your point, policies and incentives that you can put in place so people use the system correctly.
Please go.
Thanks. I just wanted to share appreciation for this program and like you mentioned, how valuable it is for that kind of last mile stretch. Our fixed routes already don't, have limitations, and with the cuts that have already happened and are coming, it's going to just be more and more essential. So I'm glad to hear that there's some exploration happening around what we might be able to do to bring some type of program like this back. And it's great that it's also no cost. So that's really exciting. And I hope we can also figure out ways to make sure that we're not decreasing the routes that we're providing, because the frequency and reliability are so important, as you highlighted in your previous slide. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate it. Just a couple more. I thought this information from our employee and student surveys might be interesting to the committee here. What factors prevent employees and students from using the GMT system? I don't think any big surprises here. But I think it really shows like the consistency between our employees and students at Ketma membership. That the times of the bus routes are not meeting people's schedules. The routes are not going to the desired locations. And interestingly, that students prefer using other modes, was like more important for them than employees, which I thought was just interesting. So I just wanted to kind of share this data with you. And again, I'm not going to review this, but I'll leave you with these, some of these comments that we received from our survey. We have an open-ended comment box. And these are just a handful, of employee and student comments. And we have oodles of comments. But I think I would also like to share with this group with our Ketma's work in Chittenden County. We work with employers, such as the Saxon Hill District. I mean, they're really challenged with, in a big manufacturing area that has no access to transit, and transit goes one way. It doesn't go back this way. And I've heard from employers, there that have challenges with recruiting employees, new Americans or folks that are transit dependent, and they may hire them, and then the employee, it's taking 2 hours for them to get to work from Winooski to go make a transfer and then get out to Essex. And then the transit stop is a mile or so from the Saxon Hill District. So some of the other areas like key employment centers is obviously Technology Park with OnLogic, Beta, and Shelburne, Vermont Teddy Bear, and Wake Robin. The challenges with not enough frequency of service. Husky and Milton, a manufacturer. So when we're looking at Chittenden County, and so I know there's a lot of, transit discussions and work to do, but I just thought I'd mention those are what I hear from employers.
Those 3 or 4 companies you just mentioned, are they members?
They are not members. And part of that reason, I think, is because they do not have access to transit. They may not have, access to a safe biking route, to the workplace.
And maybe I misunderstand, but I would think that one of the ways to advocate and try to help move it forward, but to be involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at one point, I think pre-COVID, there was some language in a transportation bill about employers over a certain size. I think it was 500 or 300. I can't remember what the number was, like to have a TDM plan in place, like at least have a plan and join the conversation. And then obviously COVID happened and that went away, but maybe something to think about.
Yeah.
Sandy, I thought that Teddy Bear, there was bus service to Teddy Bear.
There is bus service there. I don't know that it's frequent enough, is what I heard. And this was, a few years ago. So I was working with Wake Robin because they were really challenged.
Yeah.
Again, the bus stop is a mile or so from the facility. And I think they ended up implementing a company vehicle to serve that commute, which is a great creative idea to use.
So how do we overcome these sort of last mile problems? I guess we are struggling to make Green Mountain Transit work, and it seems like this could be some sort of low hanging fruit, to try and at least make it plausible and convenient to deliver certain group of folks to employers. And is that the kind of thing your organization could sort of bring awareness to or you know, we're just trying to understand in
Yeah.
our committee how we can help and what are some of the barriers, I guess, you know, to some of the fiscal challenges that Green Mountain Transit faces. And as you know, we make them pay their own ride, right? Not intended, but so it's in all of our interests to figure this out.
I guess my response to that would be CATMA is a staff of 4, under 4 full-time employees doing all of this work. And we're currently working through a 5-year strategic business plan. And, obviously a 33-year-old organization, like figuring out like how we can be more effective and resourceful to our area with the current climate of today. And I think, certainly advocacy and more input from employers and developers to share with committees and advocate would be really useful. And CATMA seems like a organization that would be a good fit for that type of work. We're just not staffed at the moment to be more actively involved, but it is something that we want to do, and which is why we created the transportation coordinator network, was to at least hear from employers on what their challenges are, so that we can share that with decision makers.
And I noticed you have an app as well. So, I mean,
Right.
yeah, it's, yeah.
Yes.
Bert, please.
How did that, when we forgot, now I remember that provision we put in the T-bill, how did that work out?
It was removed.
But I mean, did anything happen before it was removed? Was it?
I think it was moving forward. I think there was a lot of support at the committee at that time, recognizing that, the institutions have been investing, millions of dollars into transit over the past 33 years. When you look at what they put into transit and other TDM measures that they put in place and other employers. So I think if we can encourage more employers to understand the value of TDM and then invest and commit. We need a long-term sustainable support.
So my question is, though, was it removed before the bill passed? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Or was it removed the next year?
No, it was removed before the bill passed. Because that was,
There's something like businesses complained about it or something, or what was the?
I think COVID hit
Oh, okay.
and everything changed, and I certainly could follow up on the history of that.
Well, no, I think there was just trepidatious, amongst the business communities and there was just a lot of questions that they had with how it would
How would
work.
that-
And,
How would
yeah,
that work?
rural Vermont, I don't know if it's conducive to that, but I digress.
Yeah. Well, we should think about that for the future.
Mhm. Because I think employers are willing to invest if the services are there. If the services are available to their employees and
Yeah,
residents
it's
and
the service,
developers, but you gotta have the services available.
But you also work with CarShare, right?
Yes, we have a partnership with CarShare. We have a partnership for our campus program for UVM and Champlain College, where they contribute, I think $30,000 or so a year to CarShare Vermont to support subsidized memberships at CarShare's discretion. But yeah, we have a good relationship with them and Green Mountain Transit.
So Representative West.
So, just to clarify, so CATMA does not offer any public transportation. You are working with organizations to help them maximize non-automotive, like alternative options. So connecting, and so employers will pay CATMA an
Correct.
amount, and they're probably also paying GMT an
Correct.
amount.
Correct.
Okay, and that payment is really for your organization to come in and just help them figure out, we're gonna put bike parking areas here, we're gonna make sure we have a bike path coming in, we're going to look at where the GMT stops are and get that information to our employees.
Correct, and implement any programs and, you know, get people to record their trips and receive rewards and understand what guaranteed ride home is and just really, and regularly assessing that annually with the member, because things change.
And CATMA is in Chittenden County. Are there other organizations in other parts of the state like CATMA doing this in different areas?
No,
Yeah.
we're pretty unique, because that's where the population is,
Right.
obviously, in employment. And, but there's the Upper Valley TMA I had mentioned earlier, which is Dartmouth College
Yeah.
Hospital. In fact, my predecessor, helped them form that association.
Okay.
And just to give you an example, in the greater Boston area, there's 7 TMAs. And TMAs are usually focused on a specific corridor or district.
Yeah.
So in the case of CATMA, we were formed to focus on the Hill and that congestion. And then because we're a small population, it made sense for not to have 2 TMAs in Chittenden County. And so that's when CATMA expanded. So, and Go Vermont covers sort of the rest of the state, where the Upper Valley TMA and CATMA is not. I know there's been interest from Addison County about a similar type of association or support needed. And maybe there are in other areas of the state. I'm not sure, I guess, depending where the employment and housing and how people need to get around that. So just to give you an example, yeah, seven TMAs in Greater Boston. One's focused on the financial district, one's focused on the 128 corridor, and really focused because we have relationships. CATMA has relationships with all the employers that I shared on that logo sheet. If you ask me about, you know, reaching out to a specific employer, I have a contact, I have a history with them. They trust that we're going to lead them, you know, to success in implementing options for their employees. So that's where TMA's real value is, I think, especially in addition to our programming, is the relationships, the communications we have, the regular communications.
Because as you said at the beginning of your presentation, you know, having all the information is one thing, but, you know, getting it into the right hands and kind of having those relationships, like Go Vermont, you know, great resource, but if people don't know it's there or aren't being helped to find that information and share it with their employees, they don't really act on it.
Mhm.
So I think it's kind of critical. It sounds like you're kind of closing that gap between employers and public transit.
Mhm. And again, I think there has to be transportation options available. So in the case of Middlebury, you know, Addison County, maybe there needs, you know, if there was a similar type of organization, and the focus is really on carpooling, van pulling, and maybe some transit, like, you know, what transportation options works for a community, but you need someone to make that happen.
To be the kind of command central for connecting everybody up, yeah. I mean, I would love to, you know, we finally figured out in the state, you know, where we want to focus development intensity and where we don't, you know, I mean, it just seems like the time is very ripe for, you know, kind of being able to replicate what you do at scale in a range of communities and I think scaling up what you can do in Chittenden.
Right,
I've just been sort of thinking like you know, I'd love for my community, Shelburne, to, you know, maybe have a sort of audit of, you know, what are we, you know, it makes no sense to me that there's a bus stop more than a mile away from the largest employer in our town, which is Wake Robin, and which has jobs that are probably very attractive to, you know, new Americans and others who maybe the demographics that are reliant on transit.
Mhm.
And, you know, we have a workforce shortage, you know, there's a lot of like, why are we not like doing a better job of this? Sort of keeps coming back up in my mind.
Transportation and TDM is complex, you know, and so I think having a resource for these employers, is really important to work through this. We've had calls from Northwest Medical Center in St. Albans. I mean, Franklin County is a pretty big employment center, with limited transportation. So, but we're not, I don't think, in a position to expand to like a Northwest TMA, Northwest Vermont TMA, without the right, amount of resources.
Well, we've also heard, that our, some of our link buses, are not being used as much, so, it strikes me that we've got existing infrastructure and we're trying to, keep up with trends and, employment and all that, but how does the something that's not private automobiles fit within that, paradigm? So,
And if more people knew about guaranteed ride home, maybe that would increase people using the commuter routes.
right, yeah.
Well, obviously, there's plenty of interest in the committee since the 20 to 30 minutes,
No,
and all the way to
I appreciate that.
45. So that must mean that you certainly did a good job from that perspective, if there's that many questions. So
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate you coming in and
If I can just
having the conversation.
release one pitch, CATMA is holding our 4th annual Transportation Summit on October 14th, 2025 at the UVM Davis Center. And our theme this year is Future in Motion, Elevating Transportation and Housing and Economic Growth. So you will all receive an invitation and I hope you will join us. Thank you.
Thanks.
October 14th.
We are going to be done for today. Wish you all a happy Easter. Tuesday is field trip and then pretty heavy focus